we're back to 1996. And in 1996, I had been privileged to do if not the first, one of the first endovascular repairs in London, in England. And Juan Parodi, who had published on this in the 1990s, was there at the operation. We did it together in Charing Cross Hospital. In those days, the devices were made in an operating room. But it was 3 years before, at least 3 years onwards, before we could see that the manufacturers were making what we thought were dependable, high-quality endovascular devices, and several companies were developing these. And so reality was that about 1999, the patients would have the conundrum whether to have an open, as had happened before, or an endo. And there are two ways you could investigate that, either by a registry where you put all of the information in a registry and looked at it later to see what the results were. And the so-called Eurostar did that. That was led by Peter Harris and others in Holland. I always favoured an endovascular aneurysm repair trial, a randomised controlled trial, prospective, but I had to spend a lot of time in Britain convincing the vascular surgeons of the time and also the interventional radiologists. So I spent time in the Vascular Society and also the BSIR. I eventually became an honorary fellow of the British Society of Interventional Radiology, which was one of my proudest moments, that I was able to persuade the radiologists and the surgeons to work together. So the entrance criteria of the so-called EVAR trials was collaboration between those two disciplines. That was how it would work. And then we would have some training of people before they could be allowed into the trial, and that was done at Sheffield. There was a so-called RETA registry for endovascular therapy of aneurysms, and that was done by John Beard and also Peter Gaines, a surgeon and a radiologist. So we were embracing the two disciplines. So I couldn't have done this on my own. It was just that an awful lot of people bought into the idea. All I said was, are we going to be ignorant in 10 or 15 years' time, or are we going to do it properly and find out the answer? What I didn't know, it was going to be the world's first one where we would know the answer. What I hope to see, and what I'm delighted happened, was that my friends Jan Blankenstein in Holland had a similar design, which we were very supportive of. We worked together, a different population, and then my friend Jean-Pierre Beckerman in France and Frank Lederle got the protocol, and he did the OVER trial in the United States. His was the only one that was powered the same as EVAR 1, but it was important that these trials were taking place with a very similar protocol to EVAR 1 in different parts of the world, and that we could put them together. Nobody replicated EVAR 2. EVAR 2, it was unique. Nobody else ever did it. And I'm sorry about that. They now assume, the world assumes, that EVAR 2 was the last word, and patients shouldn't be operated on when they're unfit. That I always questioned, and it remains an open question for me that if a patient knows that they have an aortic aneurysm that's going to rupture, whether they are denied dying because of the ruptured aneurysm is an ethical matter. I would hate to have something in me that a surgeon refused to put right, because I wouldn't know that I was going to die of that. I could die of something else. So the trial I'm responsible for. Other people's interpretation of the trial I don't agree with necessarily. In EVAR 1 there's a big shock. To be somewhat echoed by Dream, ACE stopped too early to be able to have much input, but Frank Lederle, particularly EVAR 1, I could see that there was a possibility of open repair catching up on the success of EVAR. We could see that from 6 years out, and at 10 years it was becoming to be a worry. By 15 years it happened, but we kind of knew it was on its way. and we warned the patients to stick to a protocol and have their aortas checked. But they started at an age of 74 years, and when you're going over 8 years, the average age is about 10 years later than 74. Some of them simply didn't want to be checked anymore. We don't know, they probably were not anxious to have another lease of life of a year. Anyway, what actually happened was those who had been well enough to have an open repair at the beginning did better than the ones who had EVAR, which required occasionally to have re-interventions, which they didn't want at that stage. So yes, it was a disappointment that endovascular repair lost out towards the end of the follow-up.